Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. On Wednesday, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri met with a very interesting dignitary, Afghanistan's acting Foreign Minister, Maulavi Amir Khan Muttaqi. Now, Maulavi Muttaqi is a senior member of the Taliban administration in Afghanistan. India has no formal ties with the Taliban. This meeting is extremely significant because it's the first high-level contact between New Delhi and the Taliban regime which took over Afghanistan in August 2021. And before we start, I want to show you a few images which will tell you how significant this meeting in Dubai is. Now, India backed the Soviet-ruled government in Afghanistan until its fall in 1992. The Pakistan army backed the Taliban. The Taliban took over Afghanistan in 1996. So India backed the rival Northern Alliance. Then in December 1999, an Indian Airlines flight IC-814 with 178 passengers was hijacked to Kandahar in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. A hostage negotiation team headed by Ajit Doval began negotiating with the hijackers. But these negotiations failed because these Pakistani hijackers knew all along that they had a safe passage back to Pakistan thanks to the Pakistan ISI-backed Taliban. The aircraft was finally released with all passengers, but in exchange, India had to pay a heavy price. It had to release 3 terrorists held in Indian captivity, including Maulana Masood Azhar. Now, Azhar went on to form the Jaish-e-Mohammed, another Pakistan-backed terrorist group, which carried out several attacks in India after that Kandahar incident. Now, in 2001, India and the Western-backed Northern Alliance unseated the Taliban in Afghanistan. A new pro-Western government took over. But 2 decades later, by August 2021, the US-backed Western coalition left Afghanistan. It was a humiliating exit. The Taliban once again took power. The ISI chief landed in Kabul for a photo op. But then, in a short span of time, things began to change. Pakistani generals once looked for strategic depth in Afghanistan to counter India's influence. But today, Pakistan and the Taliban are fighting along the border. The Pakistan Air Force has bombed Afghanistan 2 times. Taliban rule Afghanistan today is an enemy of Pakistan. And ironically, the Taliban are warming up to New Delhi, as this photograph shows you. So has Pakistan's strategic depth been replaced by India's strategic heft? Is this one of the biggest shifts in India's foreign policy in recent times? Joining me to discuss this are Colonel Nikhil Apte and Dr. Swasti Rao. And joining me on the line from Afghanistan is Syed Sartaj Shahidzai. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. Syed, I want to start by asking you this. How significant is that photograph of the Indian Foreign Secretary meeting with the Taliban Foreign Minister in Dubai? How surprised were you when you saw that picture?
Well, yeah, indeed, it is surprising for most of the Afghans because we have a lot of in-depth roots with India. We have very good relations in the past. Currently, we also have very good relations with India. And Afghans were really looking forward for such moment that once again, after the August 2021, we are looking forward to tie up again. We are looking forward to expand our relations, our businesses, our cultural activities, our sport activities with the Indian government and with the Indian people. So indeed, it is a very good news. It's such a good gesture, and hopefully that once again, all those activities or all those relations which were somehow put on hold will be resumed, and now Afghans will be really much interested in working again, building up on the relations with the India, and we will resume because we need the support from the Indian people, the Indian government, the health sector, the education sector, the agriculture. sector, as well as the sports sector. As you may see that we have very
Yes.
good relations in the sport, especially in the cricket. So
I'm going to
indeed,
come
it
to
is a
you
very
on
good
that
news.
cricket because I know, Syed, that you're a former member of Afghanistan's cricket team, and cricket has played a very important role in furthering ties between India and Afghanistan. But I want to go over to Dr. Swasti Rao, a geopolitical expert. Dr. Rao, how significant was that photograph of the Indian Foreign Secretary meeting with the Taliban? Is it have we finally buried the ghosts of Kandahar?
Thanks for having me on the show, Sandeep. And this indeed, I think, is something that we need to discuss well, because this is about India's neighborhood first policy. This is about how India positions itself in South Asia or Southern Asia, whichever way you prefer to call it. I prefer to call it Southern Asia because South Asia is pretty much a post-colonial construct. Now, coming to your direct question, there are a couple of things. One is that I think it's becoming more evident that India has transitioned from the era of its red lines when
Yes.
that it had developed in engaging the Taliban government for the past complexities that you referred to or you alluded to in your opening remarks. I think it is one of the key takeaways that we have learned in recent years that has shaped our neighborhood policy is that India has made this mistake, and I would sort of say it and underscoring it that India seems to have made a mistake of engaging more with regimes instead of
Right.
states. And I
Yes.
think what we see now in India is a kind of a strategic realism, which should be welcomed, nurtured, and encouraged. That India is finally keeping India's national interest first and
Right.
engaging with states as a whole and the stakeholders that are relevant therein. And therefore, while on the one hand, India's stand on terrorism, especially when it comes to Pakistan, remains
Yes.
absolutely clear, but at the same time, India is strategically realistic enough to understand that India must make use of the strategic heft, as you said,
Yes.
that Pakistan has not been able to capitalize on because of its own, I would say, lack of, foresight and its
Yes.
own ways of messing up its Durin-lined problem.
Absolutely.
However, that's
Yes.
their mess to clear. But I think I would say that this is a new kind of a neighborhood first policy, and I commend the Indian government for taking the stand because, of course, India has genuine interest in Afghanistan. It is not only a part of the Southern Asia, but India has commercial interests out there. And
Yes.
that's why we are offering them to diversify the trade from Karachi port and actually connect to Bandar Abbas and Chabahar, where
Right.
India, Afghanistan, and Iran have a tripartite arrangement, Sandeep. Back to you.
Absolutely. No, that's an interesting coinage, a new kind of neighborhood first, as you said, Dr. Rao. And I think everyone was surprised with that photograph when it came out, the speed and the timing of it. But certainly, Colonel Nikhil Apte wasn't surprised at all because he wrote something near into 2021 that India must engage with the Taliban. And this is the time when the Taliban had just taken over in Afghanistan, the hated Taliban 2.0. Colonel Apte, are you vindicated now in all your arguments that you made nearly 4 years ago about why India must reach out to the Taliban? I mean, I'm fully aware of the fact that, look, the Taliban support the independence of Kashmir. They've supported the LET and the Jaish in the past. Their human rights record is abysmal. They don't allow girls in schools. They've conducted attacks on our missions in Afghanistan. How do you reconcile all of this with this new kind of neighborhood first policy that Dr. Swasti Rao mentioned in 2024-25?
Thanks, Sandeep. And yes, of course, it feels vindicated. But more than that, what I would like to start by is adding something to what Dr. Rao mentioned of having a pragmatic, realistic policy. What I would like to add is also a contextual measure to it. Everyone from America to Russia to China and Pakistan have been engaging with Taliban. So there
Yes.
is no question of us not engaging them and having a red lines that we would not engage with non-state actors or people who have usurped power. So to that extent, we have overcome that inhibition. If you look at it from the Taliban perspective, it is actually giving them an hedge against the GHQ. We
Yes.
would love to look at it from an Indian perspective, but if you look at it from Taliban side, by cozying up to India, and that's why that picture is significant not only in India but also for Taliban,
Right.
that they are actually positioning themselves to tell Pakistan that, hey guys, we have alternatives, we are warm with India. Despite being a landlocked country, we will get
Yes.
access through Iran to different ports. So
Right.
very significant picture and very significant movement in the geopolitical plates, as we would say.
Very significant move in the geopolitical plates. But, coming back to Afghanistan and Syed, who's joining us actually from Taliban controlled Afghanistan. Syed, tell us about the Afghan people. What is it like? What has life been under the Taliban? It's been nearly 4 years, 3.5 years to be precise, under the Taliban. What do the Afghan people think about the people of India? Has there been any change in the way you look at India? Is there a longing? Well, how does the Taliban, for instance, do they crack down on Indian material, movies, for instance, coming from India? Is that cultural bridge that we have between India and Afghanistan, has that been disrupted somewhat in the last 3 years? Just give us your sense of what life is like from inside Afghanistan.
Well, because before August 2021, life was totally different. We had good ties, like there were movies, the businesses, a lot of connections with the Indian people in the India. But after the Taliban took over, because because of all those sensitivities, and according to the Sharia law, you cannot watch movies, you cannot
Right.
listen to the music. You cannot go to cinemas or any other entertainment activities which are prohibited by the Islamic and the Sharia law. So the life has been changed now, because in the span of 4 years now, people are somehow used to it, because there are no music, there are no entertainment aspects, but the only thing that the Afghan people are quite happy for is the peace, because as it was mentioned earlier, that
Yes.
there were attacks, there were bombings, there were regular attacks on the establishments, on the NGOs, on the all the other sectors, which currently the people are they do live in peace, but we are still
Yes.
struggling with the economic issues. There is still unemployment, and there are bans and restrictions on women's and girls'
Yes.
education. Somehow you have to live with it. It is a life, and somehow the Taliban government, they have their plans
Right.
in place. But I don't know when that news will come. Just like as we are talking now about this surprising news, that now we are again resuming our ties and relations with the Indian government. So one day, hopefully, there will be a day that the Taliban will announce that yes, the women are allowed, they can work, but in a certain area, and with the limitations and restrictions as per the
Yes.
law and the procedures. And they may say that yes, the girl can go to schools and the schools can be reopened, but currently, because it is the Taliban government, and they haven't decided yet on how they will proceed, and they will go ahead with all these limitations which are currently in place.
Right, absolutely. In fact, life under the Taliban is it's not easy, as I just mentioned. There are major issues that India would have with the kind of restrictions, especially on the girls going to school, in Afghanistan. But Dr. Rao, you mentioned earlier that this is a more pragmatic kind of neighborhood first policy that we followed in Afghanistan. And you also mentioned, the fact that how we should engage with states rather than with regimes.
Yeah.
How do you see this now progressing, India's outreach with the Taliban? It's been a series of slow steps since 2022, when we first started, when our officials, MEA officials, started going and meeting the Taliban, reviving the embassy there in Kabul. Do you see this as heading to some kind of quasi-recognition of the Taliban regime? I'm fully aware of the fact that no country on earth recognizes the Taliban. So,
Right.
will there be some kind of a halfway house that we will reach with the Taliban, short of full diplomatic recognition? How will this really function?
Well, Sandeep, I mean, the best way that strikes me to sort of answer your question is to say that yes, we all want the world to be a certain way based on certain
Yes.
values and based on certain preferences. But there is always a real world out there which needs to be accepted the way it is. So in
Yes.
this constant tussle between how things ought to be, how things should be, and how things are, there is a lot of ground to cover. And I think what you say about India's evolving, engagement with the Taliban somewhere reflects that. I think in an ideal world, India would have major problems with how the Taliban thinks about the women, how Taliban thinks about minorities, how Taliban thinks about governance. Of course, I mean, I wouldn't mince my words and say that what they are doing is okay. As a woman, as a mother, I can obviously never support that. However, when we think about our regional challenges, how
Yes.
we when we have to develop a response, a state response, okay, to a very unstable southern Asia. Also, the extended neighborhood remains very unstable. Let's not
Yes.
forget that what happened in Syria was something that nobody saw coming. What happened in Israel was something that nobody really saw coming. And also, I mean, the kind of escalation that we have seen in recent times between Pakistan and Taliban
Yes.
over, the TPP and the Turan line, etc. Now, even though in the shorter term, it means that, okay, Pakistan is having a taste of its own medicine and
Yes.
Pakistan is bearing the consequences of what it has sown. But let's not forget that unleashing of jihadi elements ultimately is something that India would be, getting affected with. And
Right.
and keeping all of these things in mind, keeping all the other factors of how, for example, Pakistan-China nexus is also sort of, driving a very Islamic personality in Bangladesh, a jihadi
Yes.
personality in Bangladesh. So keeping in mind that India is right there in the middle of an extremely volatile neighborhood that at times, I mean, let's not get into which particular government is pro-India, which particular government is anti-India, but
Right.
there continue to be certain sections persistently. If you
Yes.
look at the communists in Nepal, for example, Khalida Zia's BNP in Bangladesh, JVP in Sri Lanka, although right now they've changed their tune. But what I'm
Yes.
saying is that there is a continuation of these persistent anti-India factions that are, anyway encircling our country. And also, not forget, let's not forget that the US withdrawal from continental domain in South Asia, Southern
Yes.
Asia, has actually not really been very advantageous to India, because that power vacuum was usurped by China. So keeping
Yes.
in mind these bigger factors, and when we are trying to develop a state response to these things, I think a proactive engagement of factions that control such big populations
Right.
is something that we really need. And I think in that is how I kind of look at that. And to your question about are we reaching some kind of a quasi arrangement, yes, I think there would be a kind of a de facto arrangement of making things work,
Right.
because like I said, that Afghanistan is important for many reasons that you just mentioned. And I think, I mean, India, this is also about India. I mean, in my view, I look at it as India's, a new kind of neighborhood policy where India needs to be more strategically realist, more
Yes.
proactive, and more, in tune with engaging states as a whole than regimes per se.
But Colonel Apte, coming back to our neighborhood and the policy of realism, this new kind of neighborhood first policy, there's no more talk of India out. In fact, I think the argument there is for India in. And this is being driven to a large extent by these Pakistan-China nexus. You see something like this playing out in other countries as well. Bangladesh, for instance, where both Pakistan and China have made deep inroads. What's your prediction for Bangladesh?
Very interesting, Sandeep. Before we get into the prediction, I would like to say that what is constant in this ever evolving world of geopolitics is the geography. And it is no escaping that India is the biggest, largest, and the nearest neighbor to all these smaller countries around us. And this fact is not lost on us, and obviously it is not lost on the policymakers in Maldives or Bangladesh or Pakistan or Afghanistan or anywhere else. So, of course, Maldives has seen a turnaround. Bangladesh, my prediction is that it will remain the way it is for some time to come. But in the long term or in the midterm, you will again see a rapprochement between the way the Bangladesh government is engaging with India and how the public perception towards India shapes up. As of now, the public perception of an average Bangladeshi, or at least what we are given to believe, is very antagonistic to India and Indians as a whole. But over a period of time, with different levers moving, with more economic changes, and with India growing at a steady pace compared to everyone else around, uh, probably there is a good chance that in a midterm, say 4 to 5 years, we would see a similar rapprochement or the wheel turning, as they call it, in Bangladesh. Similarly, it is likely to happen in Afghanistan as well. We do not have the best of relationships with Taliban for historical reasons, but there is a good reason to see Taliban through the prism of Pakistan. And whether it is short term or mid term, it's a very good opportunity for India to or remove this Afghan strategic depth calculus from the Pakistani
Yes.
security mindset.
Right.
So, all in all, I think engaging different actors, engaging different governments, regimes continuously with a solid policy background of contextual and pragmatic realism built in serves well for India.
Right. Pragmatic realism serves well for India, and strategic depth, as we mentioned, being replaced by strategic heft. And India, it seems, ultimately always prevails, despite what the naysayers say. But, I want to conclude by asking Syed this. Syed, you've been part of the cricket team in Afghanistan, and cricket has been, like we mentioned, an important pillar of India-Afghanistan ties. Where is the relationship at right now? Is the Afghan cricket team, you think, going to be welcomed in Afghanistan sometime soon? Could that be the next step in this warming of ties between India and the Taliban?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, and I wanted to talk about the cricket and the sports. That is a very strong relation, and we truly support the support which has been given by the Indian cricket, the BCCI, the Indian government. Like let's talk about the IPL. That it is allowing our players first to be auctioned and then allowed to play in India and play with the Indian players and the Indian teams. So, in general, sports can play a very good part in building, in strengthening our relations. And yes, of course, because they are our heroes, they are our players, they are almost welcome. But because they are so much busy in doing these different leagues across the country and then playing for the nation, so they hardly find the time to
Yes.
come back to their home or to be with their families. But they
Yes.
are almost welcome. It is their home. That they are greeted here. And, they are respected to a very large extent. So yes, we are looking forward to, and hopefully that this news will strengthen our ties in terms of the sports, and somehow we may play
Yes.
in against the Indian teams in India
In
in the
India,
very near
exactly.
future.
Yes, in the way, and who knows, that could possibly be the next step in this warming of ties between India and Afghanistan. As Dr. Rao mentioned, it's a new kind of neighborhood first policy that India is pursuing in South and Southern Asia, rather. And as Colonel Apte mentioned, that the wheel is turning, it seems, and all the naysayers who say that India is losing influence in South Asia have another thing coming. You've seen the wheel turning in Afghanistan, now in the Maldives. That's a story that we've been tracking. India's Taliban surprise and other surprises, who knows, in India's near abroad. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. From Afghanistan, we move southwards into the Indian Ocean, another country in India's near abroad which seemed to be falling into China's orbit, the Maldives. Ties between India and the Maldives hit rock bottom since April last year when President Mohammad Muizzu was elected. Now, the president campaigned on a pro-China and anti-India agenda. In fact, there were slogans of India out heard during his campaign. Now, Indian soldiers flying helicopters and aircraft in the Maldives on peace missions, humanitarian assistance missions, were asked to leave Maldives. And just 8 months later, India out seems to have been replaced by India in. The defense minister of Maldives, Mohammad Ghassan Maumoon, is meeting India's defense minister Rajnath Singh in Delhi today. There's even talk of a possible state visit by Prime Minister Modi sometime in the near future. How did India swing this surprise in the Indian Ocean? Joining me on the show is Mr. Ahmed Adib, former Vice President of the Maldives. Mr. Adib, thank you for joining us on News 9 Plus.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Mr. Adib, make sense of the Maldivian Defense Minister's visit to New Delhi. Mohammad Ghassan Mamoon, 8 months after President Muizzu campaigned on an India out election campaign, it seems like India in is the flavor of the season. How did this turnaround happen? Give us your perspective as a Maldivian.
Thank you very much. So if you can remember, I was always on Indian media. As you rightly said, beginning of 2024, there were many, I would say, many confrontations between the two countries. It was a new government which came on the agenda of India out, as you rightly said. But even at that point, I was when I was talking in the media that the India Out campaign was started by the former president Yamin,
Right.
who created this campaign against India, and who had a fallout between President Muiz and President Yamin, had a fallout before even President Muiz took the oath. But still, he inherited that campaign. It continued. But there was election in India as well as election in Maldives as well. So after the parliament elections, I was suggesting and advising that this will change, and it changed because they realized. With my experience, I knew the new government will realize that it's always been India who was there for us.
Yes.
And India was very tolerant. It was very patient. The foreign, the diplomacy, external affairs, Prime Minister Modi, everyone was so patient and helpful. So now even the current government realized that India is our true friend. So it's been always there. And then I believe now they have changed their perspective. And now, as you rightly said, it's India in now.
Do you see a state visit by Prime Minister Modi to the Maldives anytime in the near future, as is being talked about?
I really hope that Prime Minister Modi would visit Maldives because as Maldivians, we love our neighboring, our big brother, India, Prime Minister Modi, to visit us. It's been a while. Prime Minister Modi visited in 2018 for the oath taking ceremony of President Soli. After that, we've been waiting for Prime Minister Modi, and I believe this will improve our relations. I really hope that visit will happen. Already, President Muiz has visited the oath-taking ceremony of Prime Minister Modi.
Yes.
And the Foreign Minister has visited, and currently the Defense Minister is there. And I really hope that this will improve our relations, and we can take the past behind. As I rightly said, the President Yamin, who created all this, is out of the government. Yeah.
He's out of the government indeed. But, Mr. Adib, there's also that issue of tourism. There are Indian tourists coming into the Maldives. What has this season been like this year in 2024, 2025? Are you seeing a lot of Indian tourists there, or are they going to other destinations?
So during as you said, through these conflicts, very unfortunately, it happened. There was like some boycotting of tourism. Some Indian travel agencies stopped sending tourists. But I believe with the improved relations, it has already started picking up, and we see improvement in numbers. As you rightly said, this off-season of 2024, there was a hit of Indian tourists which were not there. But if you remember the past 5 years, we didn't have any off-season because Indian tourists were coming even in June, July, which is normally the off-season in Maldives. But it's improving. The travel agencies which stopped the sending tourists to Maldives has already restarted. And Maldives PR agency, tourism ministry is taking an extra effort to market Maldives in India. So I believe the relationship improvement, tourist number is improving.
Tourist numbers are improving as ties pick up between India and the Maldives. But, Mr. Adib, there's also this fear that we have in India about China's influence in the Maldives. China has been making big inroads into the Indian Ocean region, especially around India's near abroad, in countries like Maldives and in Sri Lanka. Do you see these as a Maldivian politician? You think that these fears are exaggerated, or does China have a requirement to really be in the Indian Ocean? How do you welcome them, or do you say that you treat them with a lot of suspicion and fear? Because wherever China has gone, it has created issues, it's created debt trap diplomacy as we see it from New Delhi. But give us your perspective.
Thank you very much. Exactly, as you know, as a geopolitical region, um, Maldives and I would say Sri Lanka and other countries surrounding India has become a very much interesting for China to come in and make inroads. So I would say it depends on the country itself. So it depends on which geopolitical partner that we should choose. I believe we should choose India because India is our neighbor, and we have a very long-lasting relationship, and has never made anything like that trap or something that we might go bankrupt. So I would say we have to be always careful because in the geopolitical arena, Maldives is a very small country. So I believe Maldives should balance its foreign policy and also maintain the India first policy, which we have always maintained, because we are naturally together, and this will never change. Geographically, we need each other,
Yes.
and that's the way forward, I believe. And we have to be very careful with the inroads of China and other countries, so that we don't become a pawn in the geopolitical arena.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Adib. Thank you for your time. It's great speaking with you. India has the best intentions and the best interests for the Maldives, as you correctly pointed out. Thank you very much.